Happy Easter, happy day, happy Sunday, happy whatever you want to fill in there. Just be happy. Try to live a happy life. I am Jewel. I have a pretty amazing life story, as we all do. I have things that I want to tell you about and things I want to talk about. This series of videos have been about the angels, the demons, the supernatural in my life. Recently, I just filmed a really long video, and I got carried away in using my hands and telling my story about all these things, and the video disappeared. I started saying things that I didn't really need to discuss with someone else that wasn't part of the stories, but I'm very detail oriented, so I like to get in things that when I'm telling stories to just my friends and around that, I would tell. But this is really about the supernatural and about the things in life that have happened in my life. And so a few things I know is that everything is energy and vibration. Everything is. But I do know there's angels all around. I do know that miracles are happening every day. I've seen them. They'll be in my stories eventually. I do know that there's demons or bad energy all around that, man, if you let it, it'll sabotage you and break you. So right now I think I'm going to start on moving to Virginia. I lived in Texas. I had farmhouses come to me that I had asked for, prayed for, manifested. But I want to talk about some of the things that took place when I chose to move my family to Virginia. It was really on a part of getting a little closer to my parents, and they lived in Tennessee. And I went to look in Virginia. The family did, and although jobs were found, and we just couldn't find a house. A month of looking, and there was no house to be found for our family. So I left my name with a real estate agent, and one day I was back in Texas, and I was talking to my sister on the phone, Sally, and she said something that I have used the rest of my life. She said, Pookie Jane, which is what she called me. I called her Birdie. Do you want to move to Virginia? And I was like, absolutely, it's time to go. I want to be closer to the parents, and I want a change. And she said, then leap, and the net will appear. And I decided to put all my stuff in storage, pack the kids and the dogs, and just go. And right after I made that sound decision, a real estate lady called. And she had a house in Hiltons, Virginia, and a house in Gray, Tennessee. Never hearing either one of them. I picked a house in Hiltons, Virginia. It's where the Carter Cash family is from. I didn't know that at the time, but just to give you a little information on Hiltons, it's a great little town. Anyway, I picked this log house there, and we had the most bizarre things happening in that log house. When I packed up the van and the U-Haul and the kids and the dogs, when we drove into Virginia, it was like stepping back in time. And we came up to this house that we were going to lease, a log house. It was pretty good size on 30 acres of land, a mountain in the back. It was just really quite unique and quite beautiful. And it ended up being a really weird time in our life. It was very short-lived there. It was 6 months there. The owner of the house had been married to a very young girl, Russian girl, like 30 years his junior, which is fine. But when we walked into the house that evening, there was a fire lit in a wood stove in the kitchen, a loaded gun on the counters, and all their furniture was still in the house. Now, I had a U-Haul outside with all my furniture. We went down into the basement. It was filled with 30 years of stuff. Later, I found out he had lived there for 30 years. Another big room off the kitchen was filled with stuff. So we were kind of freaked out. That night, we stayed up, most of the night thinking, oh my gosh, what have we gotten ourselves into? Of course, with the gun up high, I had little kids then. And through that period of living in that house, some really bizarre things happened. The guy that owned the house, we would come home and he and his little wife, she was from Russia, so sweet, would just be in the house. And one day I told him, I said, you really deceived us, because he was there all the time in the basement and stuff. And he said, yes, I did. And I'm thinking, all right. Well, eventually we ended up getting a restraining order out on him, but not yet. Not yet. He would come and look through the windows, and, you know, we would all hit the floor. But one night I heard something in the house. There was 4 bedrooms, 1 bath. And I heard something in the house in the little girl's room. And so I went, which was right across from my room upstairs. I went to the doorway, and there, in spirit, was the owner of the house, bending down, looking in this desk that he had left in the little girl's room. And he had a fishing hat on with fishing hooks in it. And when I saw him, I flipped on the light, not realizing he was in spirit at that time. Flipped on the light, and he wasn't there. Well, my nature is to pray. And so that's what I started doing, just telling anything evil to get out of my house, telling all negative, demons, principalities, anything, get out of my house. You can't mess with me and my kids. So when I flipped on the light, he was no longer there. Went downstairs, doors all still locked, all the other kids okay. Becca and Sally still, or my children still sound asleep. So the next day we were up and we were doing whatever we were doing. And in the meantime, all his furniture but a piano had been moved to the side room. So our furniture now was in the house. And I had already told him he needs to knock on the door when he comes over, da-da-da-da-da. And so he knocks on the door, and I open the door, and he walks in, and he has that fishing hat on with the hooks and stuff, and he was just grinning. And I thought, oh man, he knows how to leave his body, which people do travel all the time, leaving their body, astro travel, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, he knows how to do that, and he knows very well that I saw him, because, I mean, the look on his face was just unbelievable. Same hat as I saw the night before. Well, I found, which I left out of the story, that morning before he came over, a fish hook in the girl's carpet, exactly where I had seen him. And I'm like, how did he do that? But then when he came over in that hat with the fish hooks in it, and I'm thinking, he knows something. He knows something. So we were already in the process of moving to another house. Not in the process of, we were looking for another house. And we went out every day to search. And I had found this beautiful farmhouse that I loved. And as is my nature, I start praying for it. I put a note on the door, as I did with the farmhouse in Texas. And left a note that I would really like to raise my family there, and would they consider us moving into this house. So a month or 2 later, I get a call that yes, they would be honored for our family to live there as well. We meet, we go explore through this 4,000 square foot old farmhouse that is just awesome. It too is on 3 acres of land, like the farmhouse in Texas. But we have to help the owner pack up her stuff. And it was my pleasure to do so. So as we're packing up the stuff, she says the house is haunted. And I had already been to the library to get the history of the house. There was an old family cemetery up on the mountain, and it said that this family bought 60,000 acres of land for $1,200, and there was numerous people that had passed in the house. But the last 2 ladies, Marguerite and Gladys, were the last 2 ladies to live in the house and pass while living in the house, and they were actually buried up on the hill. Well, when we got the house all packed up and stuff, it was time for us to move in. Moving day was coming, and my 2 older kids wanted to spend the night in the house. before we actually moved in. So I had a nephew that lived with me and then my oldest daughter. Well, they spent the night. I drove them over, and we didn't have electricity on yet. We didn't have the phones hooked up. You know, cell phones weren't as common as they are now. We didn't have all that ready yet. So the next morning, they spent the night there. The next morning, the little girls and I drove over there, and the door was locked, so I knock on the door. And I see this lady walk from the back of the house in the kitchen to the front door, and then she just turned and into what later we find is the parlor. But then the kids run down the stairs, and they're all excited about the noises they heard and how fun the house was. And so we're all excited because it is moving day. But as we're driving away, I stop on our driveway in front of the house and went, who was that lady that walked from the kitchen to the parlor? And they were like, what? You know, and they're used to me seeing things or hearing things and recognizing the supernatural. And I'm thinking, wow, who was that? And eventually we call our little friends, Marguerite and Gladys, who were the last two ladies to live there. You would see them out in the garden. We moved in. We had a beautiful garden. We had chickens. The kids' rooms were upstairs. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms upstairs, 2 downstairs. The kids' rooms were all upstairs. And my nephew that lived with us used to get up and say that someone at night would sit on the side of his bed, and it would wake him up and scare him because he could feel them sitting down. Well, one day we're upstairs and we're looking out the window, and we see 2 ladies out in our garden, just plain as day. They're just out there. And so we go downstairs and walk out there, and they're not there. And later we come to realize that it's Gladys and Marguerite. Now, I homeschooled the kids at this time, and we had a big harvest table that my sister Sally made it, and we love it. A friend of mine has it now. And anyway, so we would homeschool on that table, and then we had a farm table that every morning we had learned that the tradition of Marguerite and Gladys were to make biscuits and jelly and have fresh butter out for visitors, travelers that were coming by. As people would come out of Kingsport, they would actually come down to the house in buggy, wagon, horse and wagon, and have something to eat. And the sisters always had biscuits and jelly and butter. So we kind of made that our tradition, that every morning we'd get up and make fresh biscuits and have it ready. Well, on the farm table in there, when I would arrange the biscuits, butter, and jelly and napkins and stuff on this table, I would go into the other room to homeschool the girls and my nephew, and we would come back and everything would be rearranged on the farm table, the enamel top table, and it would all be rearranged. So it started becoming just a little fun thing that we would put the biscuits and butter and stuff one way, and they would end up moving it while we were homeschooling to where they wanted it. I always loved that. It wasn't we were being mean. I like to see that they would move it. But I would always hear the girls or my nephew say, you know, someone's talking in my room. Well, one night I'm laying in bed, and I'm newly separated at this time, and I'm learning to be alone all the time, and I hear this man and 2 women talking plain as day up in the kids' room. I mean, it was like they were in the house. So I get my gun and I run up these stairs and flip on the light, and no one's there. And go back to bed and hear them again a little bit later, run up those stairs, no one's there. And so all I kept doing was, like in Oregon, my story about Oregon is go, Marguerite, Gladys, y'all are scaring me. I don't know who the man is with you, but let's stop. I'm getting scared. So I worked at Profits, and I'm just kind of filling in little stories of supernatural things happening, because we've got some really cool things coming that are just amazing in my life. But so I work at Profits department store, and I put the kids in school. You know, life is changing, and you do that. And um, I'm really broke at this time. I'm really broke at this time. But so I had $10 to my name. Now, don't get me wrong. I could have called my parents, da-da-da-da-da, but it's just the purpose of the story. So I have $10 to my name. And I'm a prayer, always have been. I've been so religious you couldn't stand me, so metaphysical you couldn't stand me. But so I'm in a season of prayer. And I hear God when I'm leaving. Now, I'm not schizophrenic, just sometimes I hear the voice of God. I hear God when I'm leaving tell me to give this $10 to a coworker. And I say out loud, no sir, I will not. And I hear him again, plain as day, say, go give that $10 in your wallet to a coworker. And someone that was walking out with me a little bit behind me said, Jules, who are you talking to? And I go, God. And she laughed. But I turned around and I said, this is not with a joyful heart, because I've always believed if you give, it needs to be with a joyful heart. And I went in and I went down the escalator and I handed her the $10. And she started screaming, oh my God, I've been praying for $10. I've been praying for $10. And I said, it's a gift from God, be blessed. And I cry real easy, so I start crying and I walk up the stairs or go up the escalator, and I'm in my car. And then I drove Volkswagens. I had a Bug at that point in time. And I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. I've got $10 that you just had me give to Nadine. Now I'm broke. I have no groceries. I'm fixing to go pick up 3 kids. My nephew had already moved out at this time. 3 kids, and I don't know how I'm going to feed them. And I picked up the kids, and your kids always know when something's wrong. But my oldest daughter, she goes, Mom, what's wrong? And I said, nothing. Everything's great. We're fine. And when we get home, she checks the mail. I asked her to check the mail. We're still in the car. And there's 1 piece of mail in there. And it is to me, from me. To Julie Star, Jewel Star, from Jewel Star. For $100 to a grocery store. White's grocery store. So I guess for me is, if I had not given the girl the $10, would the universe, God, supply me that $100 to get groceries? Would that have happened? I'll never know, but it happened. I had a $100 gift card to myself, from myself, to the grocery store to get groceries. Tell me that's not cool. That is so cool. From that moment on, we had so many great things happen. I stayed in prayer a lot. I had just some great things that happened. I had met someone later on after I'd been separated for 6 months, and we just hit it off. I ended up going back to my husband a week before my divorce was final. But there was so many miracles that would take place that, like I had said, if I was supposed to be with this guy, that I would find an antique red velvet cape that was affordable. And the very next day I went in a store, an antique store, just looking, not for the cape, just looking, and there was this beautiful red velvet cape that was $35, and it was hand stitched, and she said it was from the 1800s. And all those are little things. There's things that are manifested by the words of your mouth. And so those are things, and I don't care what people call them. We have a verbiage issue in this season of the world. Miracles, manifestation, but the words of your mouth create your atmosphere. And so that's what I was really learning. And there this cape was. Well, I ended up breaking up with him and going back with my ex-husband a week before the divorce was final. But in that time period, just some really unique things happened. But I'm also heavy into prayer, heavy into learning the mystics of Christ, not just religion. I want to know why we're not laying on hands and people, and seeing people healed. Why aren't we manifesting stuff like that when I could manifest other things? But before I got back with my ex-husband, I had seen a Volkswagen van early on in the year when we first separated, because I was driving a yellow bug, and I saw this van, and I had my oldest daughter and her best friend, the two little girls in the back, and this van went in front of me, and I go, oh my God, that van will be mine one day. Okay, I'd never seen it before. All the kids were laughing. I love Volkswagens. A few months later, I don't know what the time period was, but I have a knock on the door, and there's a guy at the door that says that the van's mine, and it's a gift from God. And I went, what? And he said, I'm giving you this van. It's a gift from God. And he handed me the title to that exact van that I had seen months before. It was the most beautiful restored Volkswagen van that I had ever seen in my life. And it was handed to me, the keys and all. And I had the Volkswagen van that I had seen months or close to a year before handed to me. That was mine. Manifestation, miracle, I don't care what you call it. It was my van. And I was so excited that I was seeing things of the supernatural life. It was just so cool. Well, when I was separated and really working on learning manifestation, and for me it was Christ. It was the way Christ said we would do this, and he said we would do so much more. And all my life I've been saying, why don't we do so much more? How do we learn this manifestation? How do we learn laying on of hands where it really creates a physical thing that we can see? So here's this beautiful van. Well, I get back with my ex-husband, and things shift. I don't know if it's in my head. I don't know exactly what had happened, but we all went camping. We used to love to camp, but we always set up another tent. And I had this very, very vivid dream. And in this dream, there was this rose, and it was the most beautiful rose I'd ever seen, colors I've never seen before. And the petals are falling off of it and dying when they hit the ground. And next to it is a dandelion, and he has that powder puff head, and he has a sailor hat on that has elastic and then a little ribbon right here, and the shirt that has a red collar, and I don't know what you call it, but it goes in the back. It's blue with white, and his leaves are his hands, and he has them on the hips, and it's just given me the meanest look. I actually have it taped in a Bible. It's looking at this rose, and in my dream, I say out loud, why is this rose dying? And there's a sun up here in the corner, and the sun says, he blocks you from my light. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have made a terrible mistake. Well, it won't be for another 3 years that I get through that mistake, but what a growing period that is for me in those 3 years. After that dream, and I realized that I made a very huge mistake. It was such a vivid dream too. The colors were so beautiful, but so many things happened. One day I parked the van, and I hear the Spirit say, park in the back driveway, but it was thundering and it was lightning, and we still lived in the farmhouse. And I parked underneath this 200-year-old maple tree where I always parked. And when we got out of the van, we went in, and then my little child comes up, my middle kid comes up and puts her little face in my lap and says, Mom, you know Jesus loves you, right? And I was like, yeah, why? And she was like, come look outside. And that tree, that 200-year-old maple tree, had fallen and smushed my van flat. We would have all been dead had I hesitated to get out of the van. And I thought that alone is a miracle. We're all alive. Now, that was a bad time for me. I didn't smoke or drink at that point in my life, and I drank a whole box of wine. I was just devastated that I had had that dream or that vision, but although I was asleep, so a dream, you know, a week before. We weren't getting along. Things were happening. My beloved van that had been delivered to me almost a year before that I loved, was now crushed. And all the things I was learning to manifest seemed to be going away. So I researched that and I studied it, and I still don't have good cause how I manifested those things or what in the universe happened to rid the things that I had been blessed with earlier. But it was an interesting time. After that, we ended up moving. We moved to what we called the holding house. I had gotten a job in Abingdon, Virginia, and I had thrown myself into religion. And really, even though people would say I was so religious they couldn't stand me, I couldn't stand me. It kept me from suicide. I threw myself in something, and I couldn't do drugs, and I didn't drink, and prayer and Christ and church was what I threw myself in, not only to learn, but to bring some peace to me. And it was a great learning lesson during that time period. We had 2 dogs, and I was teaching the kids, and I was learning on laying on of hands, transfer of energy, whatever you want to call it. I'm a Reiki master, so Reiki, I have a certification in therapeutic touch. We can call it therapeutic touch. It is energy and it's vibration. And laying on of hands is a fine word for me. I am filled with the Holy Spirit, and that's coming too. Which I didn't really tell you about that. That's coming too. So let's go back to the farmhouse before we moved to the holding house. I got real sick, and people laid hands on me. And I told them that I don't know what you got, but I want it. That I wanted it. And that was my first awakening of really laying on hands and healing. I knew about energy because I had been in the metaphysical world for so long, but they called it being filled with the Holy Spirit. And I had learned about that earlier in life, which is another story in the videos earlier. But now it's coming to fruition that everything, the seed that was planted is coming now. It's coming to pass. And I had prayed for a prayer language, a light language, speaking in tongues, whatever your verbiage is, put that in there. And nothing happened. They laid hands on me, I prayed, and I talked to my spiritual mother at the time about laying on of hands and what it meant to have a prayer language and speaking in tongues, and nothing happened. And then one day the kids and I were speaking, pretending to speak in Korean, which we had tried to learn because my daughter was in Taekwondo. And we were playing, and this whole language came out, and I was like, oh, I learned something from that tape we listened to. And later on, I find out it's my prayer language. It just had manifested, and at the time, I didn't know what it was. So even if you don't believe in being filled with the Holy Spirit or speaking in tongues, it is real because I can do it. My children can do it. Even my ex-husband received it later on. Another story, later on. So now I'm learning to speak in tongues. I'm praying this way all the time, not in front of everyone, but I'm so fascinated that I have, at first it was sounds, now it's a whole language, sounds that would come out, and I was so fascinated with it. So I know that's real because I can do it. I think I'll stop here because my next story is about laying hands on animals and watching them heal. But I got back together with my ex-husband. We had to move to what we called the holding house. I was getting ready to move to Abingdon, or wanting to move to Abingdon. And then a whole scenario of life happened in the supernatural. But I hope I don't lose you in my stories. I go back and forth. It's just who I am. It's what I do. Please, when I tell you my stories, just know they're mine. Use the verbiage that is good for you. It's a beautiful day. Have a happy Easter. Peace to everyone. Live a happy life. It's a choice. See you next time.